But she always makes sure to indulge in her favorite hobbies. Hiking, camping, rescuing animals, and most recently, kayaking. Erin is first and foremost. Sorry, Erin.
Introduce myself. Okay, so I'm a lifelong learner. So I really have enjoyed learning. I started my life as a military last year. Then I was a teacher for 20 plus years. And my husband retired out of the military. I said it's my turn to do what I wanted to do, and I went back for my PhD. Currently in the Texas Women's University Rhetoric program, getting my PhD in rhetoric. Okay, no problem. Absolutely. And so it's exciting for me to connect my love of language with my love of law enforcement. And so here we are. So it's really nice to meet all of you and to see all of your faces today. So again, my name is Erin, and I'm going to be your guide as we learn where language and the law meet. Okay? All right, here's what we're doing today. You'll notice like somehow I need to introduce myself without being boring. I'm working on that part. Okay, I have a couple of guests here. Name that criminal grounds. There are prizes involved. And we're going to do some case studies. We're going to talk about cases where language actually made the biggest difference. Okay, and then we'll do some a little bit of a. All right, so introductions and explanations. So for a self-proclaimed introvert, and I am pretty introverted, introductions are always really awkward. So hopefully there are other awkward people out there with you. So the whole purpose of today is that words matter, and the focus is on words. The theme is words. So we're going to start with the word precocious, because precocious was me. All right. I was a precocious child. I started reading at the age of 3. My poor mother. I'm an only child. I wrote and illustrated my very first book. It was a small book, but it was a book at age 5. And then somewhere around age 8, I decided I wanted to be a forensic pathologist. If you don't know what that is, it's like the medical examiner where they go outside and figure out who, what happened to the body and what happened. So then, I don't know, being a kid, I decided, you know what, maybe. Okay, the clicker's not working. There it is. All right, so we're going to fast forward 9 years, and I joined the Colorado Army National Guard. And I spent 6 years as a military police officer. My basic training in military police academy school was one of the first co-ed groups. And there were 87 females that went into my company, 36 of us graduated. It was incredibly difficult, and I am incredibly proud that I made it through. It was a very long time ago. So the helicopter picture, I was air assault, so I actually fell out of helicopters a lot. Most of the time you think like National Guard is, it's only part-time. I spent most of my time on active. I really spent a lot of time. I did called out for emergencies. We rescued people during blizzards. At the time before marijuana was legal, we went on like marijuana raids and like trying to find them and all that kind of stuff. So I did 6 years, so that's enough of that. And it was great, but I was done. And I got out and I decided I wanted to teach. I don't know where the connection is to that. I just decided I wanted to teach. So I spent the next 20 years teaching English. And I mean, I love English. Obviously, I read, I wrote. So 20 years. My husband and I did active duty. I taught in many different states, and now it's my own time. And I took it out of the house. I am pursuing my PhD. I'm also getting a master's degree in science and linguistics in conjunction with my PhD because I'm pretty. All right, what is forensic linguistics? Heard this question all day. So excited. What is it? Okay, so here are some of the 7 basic categories of forensic linguistics. Authorship, authorship identification. Who wrote it? Did the person really write it, or did somebody else write it? Who owns it? Did Mark Zuckerberg really own Facebook, or was it Paul Seglia who said he owned it? And you go back and look at all of the information and the emails that they argued. The second is discourse analysis. How is it said? What is said? This is actually my main focus right now. As I'm studying suspects who have been convicted of murder, their interviews, and I'm trying to look at what words they say and do those words indicate guilt or innocence. It's like truly a study. I'm counting pronouns out of thousands of lines of interview, counting these pronouns and then comparing them to non-criminal transcripts. And trying to see if there's something in there. That's what it is. You're also looking at their words, their statements, for clues that will help us see if they are guilty, if they're innocent, if they have remorse, was it really their intent? The third one is forensic phonetics. Phonetics means sound. Okay, so how does the speaker sound? What do certain vocalizations mean? Did that really sound like that? And did that sound mean what they said it meant, or did it mean something different? So, is that or the Okay, it can make a difference. Everybody talks about how the smallest things can lead to a break in the case. This is the same idea. Okay, so then forensic stylistics, this is also a lot of what I do. This is connecting the deeper meanings, looking for themes. Like they use those figures of speech, the analogies, simile, like, and as, and just trying to decide those literary devices that give our language meaning. You are as beautiful as a rose, or are you a rose with thorns? Do we need to cut you like a rose, or should we let you bloom in beauty? So all of those show up in writing, and using those stylistics and those themes help you decide what the intent was in that writing, or even in speech. Then 5 is for the transcription, exactly what it sounds like. You're transcribing what has been said word for word for word. If you get a word wrong in a transcript, it can change the entire meaning of what was being said. Witness statements, okay? The judge and jury, if they don't have the right information, they can make a decision. And it happens a lot. And then linguistic dialectology, that's big words for accents. Okay, the accents that are around the country. They have a southern accent. They use words that are used up in the northern part. We're going to talk about that. Or are they out of the country? If they speak Spanish, can you decide where they speak, where their Spanish is from? There's a very different sound in Puerto Rican Spanish than Mexican Spanish, than Colombian Spanish. Like it's different. And sometimes, most of the time, I can tell I don't even speak Spanish that well, and I can tell kind of in the general area where they come. So those are important things and clues that you can get as well. Variation is exactly what it sounds like. It's really just the differences. So they call it more social linguistics, like sociology. It's sociolinguistics, the language of society. Okay. So how is language used? How is it changed from person to person, region to region, country to country? And how does it change from language to language, like we were just talking about with Spanish? So here's an example. There's this thing called the habitual beat. You often find it in African American English, Black English, and it may be something that sounds like it do be that way sometimes. Okay, you hear it, and it's not just in African American English; it's in different things. Or she be seeming like that all day. What happens is that not everybody understands that. So when a law enforcement officer or a judge hears statements that use this habitual beat, they don't understand what's actually being said. And so in the Trayvon Martin case, there was a witness who used this habitual being quite a bit, who used the judge, and they gave the wrong testimony for the Trayvon Martin. Big problems, right? There's also this study in Philadelphia that was conducted by PhD students, maybe, I think they were PhD students, where they sent 4 court reporters, you know, the people that take down everything that's being said during a trial. They had 4 of them, and they played interviews from different suspects. 2 used the Black English, 2 did not have used Black English. Of the 4, only the 2 who used Black English. That's some serious problem, right? That's an issue. The one who was able to transcribe it, Black lady. Yep. Okay, so there is some serious miscommunication there. We're not going to know how to fix it until we start talking about it. Okay, so we're working on it. So those are variations. That's an example of variations within language, within a language, within a language. All right, 40 steps out of the way. Are you ready? All right, guess who? Born in 1899 in Brooklyn, New York. There's more than one clue, so if you don't know already, it's okay. If you did know that, I would. I had many different nicknames, including Snorky, Public Enemy #1, and Big Boy. No. Who said that? Ding, ding, ding. Al Capone, it is. And you get a prize because you were brave enough to wear your name. All right. So he worked his way up through the New York game plan, and then he moved to Chicago to straighten out those problems in Chicago. His form of straightening out is denied. He became the kingpin for the Chicago crime syndicate for 7 years before he went to prison. He went to prison not for murder, but for tax fraud. I mean, that's how you catch all good criminals, right? And then he did federal time before, like 6 years before he moved to Alcatraz for 6 months. And then he died. And there is Al Capone. So interestingly, Al Capone has made his way into our own language. He's become part of the English language. He's a bird. He says, they're trying to Al Capone the president. This was said in a speech like 3 or 4 years ago. Okay, and then don't be such an Al Capone. Yeah, since he, had complications from syphilis. All right, next one. Second round. Ready? Oh, hey, we missed number 1. Number 1. I was a child prodigy and started college at the age of 16. Yes. Okay, after getting my master's and PhD, I taught mathematics at UC Berkeley. What happens I never won? I wrote a 39,000 word manifesto against technology. He says it's the revolution of technology. Machines are going to take over man. I'm scary because he's not followed on. And managed to be published in major newspapers. He hand delivered or mailed 16 bombs to various cities throughout the U.S. to warn against the dangers of machines. And he was eventually caught in Montana, where he was living as a permanent bomb. Yes, bomber. There were 2 of these. I'll give you the numbers. Thank you. Good job. All right. The Unabomber is probably the most well-known case of forensic linguistics. And that is where, hey, look, another one. And that is where we are going to start. Theodore Ted Kaczynski, aka the Unabomber. This is after his arrest, which happened, happened in 1996. So handle them carefully. The words have more power than atom bombs. Don't say just. All right. So Ted Kaczynski was born May 22nd in 1942 in Chicago. I don't think he knew alcohol. He had normal parents. He had a young brother. He had a good home. It was a middle-class family. His dad was a sausage maker. His mom was a homemaker. But from the get-go, they really felt that something was off. They felt something was wrong. So about the age of 9 months old, Ted Kaczynski was rushed to the Children's Hospital for a horrible case of like hives, like an allergic reaction. Does that have like deadly food allergies? I can tell you that doesn't feel good, but I can't imagine at 9 months old and have no way to express it. So he went there, he stayed there for a week. Doctors could not figure out what it was, but his mom was not allowed to stay with him. At that time, you couldn't stay. So Ted was in there by himself. His mom talks about it later in an interview, and she says like it was the most horrific thing she'd ever seen. Somebody took a picture for her, and she said her child was utterly terrified and then lifeless. So when he came out of the hospital, he was despondent, was listless. Those are the words that she used to describe it. One said that the baby was returned to her healthy, but he was emotionally unresponsive from the age of like 9 months old. That's a problem at that point. He was limp and a bundle of clothes. This was like a bundle of clothes for weeks. So this obviously traumatized her. Even though he still had no words to explain himself, there was some obvious traumatization there. So when he was around 9 years old, his family moved from Chicago to Evergreen, Illinois. This is a suburb outside of there. Not from around there, but I'm told it's a nice suburb. He went to elementary school there. Not surprisingly, he skipped a grade. If you've ever been in a school, skipping a grade is great for academics. It ruins your social life. Okay, like you have nothing in common with the people you are now with. And it's socially and mentally very hard to make those adjustments. I both skipped a grade and I was a teacher, and it was awful every time. So he had no friends. Even though Wanda tried to help him make friends, she would lure like the neighborhood kids to come in. I've got cookies, I've got lemonade, come with my son. Can't do that nowadays, but he could. So most of the time, he would just sit there and stare at them, and then those kids would eat their cookies, and they would leave, and there were no friendships made. But he did have like connections with his family, or at least at first. But sometimes he would shut down. His brother David, the younger brother, we talk about it later, he would just shut down. He would return to that listless, unresponsive boy. And he would be angry and he wouldn't talk to anybody and nobody would get through to him. So it was around this time that Theodore Kaczynski's dad, who also was named Theodore, but went by the name Turk, started to share with his son his best coping skill. And it was to go out into nature. It was to go into nature and get away from everybody. So you're gonna, like, obviously, it stuck because where did they find Ted Kaczynski in 1990? Okay, so they cope with the stresses by being outdoors, getting as far away from people and things and cultural expectations, society expectations as possible. This is where the foundation for Ted's anti-technology revolution started around the age of 9. So Ted Kaczynski graduated high school early. At the age of 16, his younger brother David was 9. He was excited to move away because he was tired of the constant school bullies, and his parents said that he was hopeful to find like-minded people in college. Anybody know where he went to college? For Harvard. All right. So 16 years old, he's going to Harvard. Think about your own 16-year-old people that you know, and then heading off to Harvard. Then think about them with no social skills and inability to center themselves unless they're in nature. So I can't fathom how difficult that had been for any college, much less an Ivy League college that truly had such high rigor at that time. I mean, they still do, but it was even more so back then. So the next 3 years, he says, were the worst years of my life. So he had an okay freshman year, sophomore, junior, senior year was horrible. Why? He became part of a science experiment. For 3 years, he was that was done by Dr. Murray. They think Dr. Murray used to work with the CIA. They're trying to form like this psychic truth that where they can, take over mind melding everybody and be like super joke. Again, I don't know, but it was really bad. So this destruction says that it was a psychic destruction by humiliating undergraduates, thereby causing them to experience severe stress. Quote unquote from Dr. Murray's boss. Over and over and over again, 3 years. They were messing with his mind constantly. They would show them horrible videos, make their stress level way up there, and then say, "Watch this back." And then tell them that they're horrible people when it doesn't work. How do you get involved in that? He was recruited. They said, "Hey, you, let's go." And they didn't have as much freedom. And they're on scholarship too. So, she might have been, for sure, you can go. Oh, somebody wants me? Okay. Okay. So many experts say that this is when Ted Kaczynski's anti-social kind of really kicked in. He was already anti-science. He didn't really like it. It just made it obvious that science was really bad. And then he started hating people even more. So it became an obsession with him, more so at this point. It's also during the time he had his first homicidal thoughts. Okay, so according to his own journal, Ted Kaczynski, unsurprisingly, had ideas about killing the people who ran the program. Not surprising. So these traumatic experiences were the formative years. He's still only 16, 17, 18, but this was also the catalyst for his downslide, even though at the time he was still trying to show that he was a decent person. That eventually goes away. So after he graduated high school or college, his undergrad, he goes to the University of Michigan, right? Yeah, University of Michigan for his master's and his PhD. By the age of 20, he's graduating, or 22. So in 1967, he was hired as the youngest professor ever at UC Berkeley, mathematics. Stop for a minute, think about where he's going and the environment at UC Berkeley in the late 60s. It's really liberal over there, and he has no idea what that looks like, and he's still really young. He's barely older than his students. So he's brilliant. They promoted him to be an assistant professor, which was, hey, you're on track for tenure. You're going to get up there. You're going to be dean of the college. But not surprisingly, the student reports were they didn't like him. He wasn't approachable. He didn't answer questions, and he told everybody they were stupid. Compared to him, they might be. I don't know. But he didn't want to sit and actually teach. That wasn't his purpose. So in June of 1969, Professor Kaczynski suddenly said, "I quit." He left. And he goes back and decides, I can't do this anymore. So he moved back to Illinois, and he moved back in with his parents at this point. He stayed there for 2 years, but during his 2 years, he's roving around the world, like the United States, looking for a plot of land where he can be by himself. I mean, it sounds like that might be a good idea for him at that point. He wanted a life of solitude. He wanted to be away from social media and cultural issues, or social problems and cultural issues. So in 1972, he found and built a cabin in Lincoln, it's near Lincoln, Montana. I just got back from Yellowstone and stayed in Montana, and let me tell you, that is still, I can imagine what it was like in 1972. This cabin had no running water, it had no electricity, it had no plumbing. It was a bed, there, a desk, and a bookcase. His primary books, encyclopedias, the dictionary, and the source. Okay, he wanted that self-sufficient life. He wanted to be off-grid. He was doing really, really well. So progress does start doing what progress does, and soon there were developments that were coming up around Kaczynski's land. He went hiking one day, came up over a ridge into this beautiful meadow. He was excited to see what was meadow, and somebody had built a road in the meadow. That sent him over the edge. That society was encroaching on his land. Wasn't technically his land, obviously he didn't own it, but that was his meadow. So pretty soon he starts sabotaging these developments. He's setting stuff on fire. He's putting sugar in gas tanks. He's setting trip wires that set off like moving shrapnel bombs to people in these developments. All they're doing is trying to live there. They had no idea there was a madman that was just on the corner. And then finally, he couldn't take that anymore because it wasn't working, and he mails his first bomb. So this is 1978. He sends his first bomb, beginning his infamous Unabomber career. He taught himself how to build bombs. He taught himself with library books, because there were not really computers at that point. So he taught himself, like, and he didn't even blow off any fingers. I can't imagine me trying to just make a bomb. It would be really bad. And so the first ones weren't that bad, but as he kept going and he learned more, they got more sophisticated and more deadly. And so he read about, in his books, forensic evidence. He purposely planted other people's fingerprints into these bombs and sent them off so they couldn't find them. He went to lick his own envelopes. He didn't leave any prints. He would put fake hairs that were not his. Like, he was really terrifyingly smart. So 1978, 1979, more in 1979, and then it keeps going. The bombs go on and on. And some of them were caught before they could detonate, and some of them did not. Or some of them, they wouldn't detonate because of a malfunction, and that would make them even more upset. So even though that was happening, we were still hurting a lot of people, even if they weren't dying. So from 1978 to 1984, there were 7 bombs, 17 injuries. In 1985 alone, there were 5 bombs that were sent out. They had 3 injuries and the very first fatality. 87 had 1 bomb, 93 had 2, 94 had 1 and another death, 95 had 1 and another. Take a look at that. 1978 and 1995, we still have non-profit. 17 years. How did you get caught? Meet FBI agent James Fitzgerald. James Fitzgerald was, at that point, he had been a cop into a couple different municipalities. Then he went to the FBI, and then he went to the BAU, which is really new at that point. BAU was really new. He didn't have a whole lot of time under his belt, not a whole lot of experience. But in 1995, he was asked to join this Unabomber case because people were retiring out after spending their entire careers on this case, and they needed fresh blood. And he didn't understand why he was selected, but he's like, what do I have to lose? So it was also during 1995 that Ted Kaczynski mailed his manifesto to the newspaper. Okay, what's a manifesto? Essentially this long diatribe why the world is horrible and it should stop, or why somebody is so amazing, why somebody should be a dictator. It's all about their truth and how the world should be ran. That's a lot of personal information if you know how to find it inside the manifesto. Okay, so he wanted it to be published in several major newspapers. At first they said, no, we're not publishing it. But then somebody said, okay, yeah, no, we really should publish it. Maybe it'll kickstart somebody's brain, right? Maybe they'll recognize it. But this manifesto was the beginning of the end for the Unabomber, because James Fitzgerald and one of his partners decided to enlist the help of renowned linguist Robert Shuey. Mr. Shuey is still alive to this day. He's 90-something now. And
Good afternoon, Dallas Public Library. It is almost 3 o'clock, which means time for chess club? Come on up to the third floor.
Chess club.
Play a game, learn how to play. Be there until 5 o'clock. Be there.
So, Ted, or James Fitzgerald, Susan Brown, and Robert Shuey all sat down. They each began their own analysis into this manifesto. So, what did they find? These are the words: rearing children, working stiff, chick, broad, tautology, cradle to grave, unclean thoughts, Sierra, Negro, holy robots, over socialization, willfully, check the spelling, plain footsie, clue, check the spelling, times of trouble, and surrogate. There were more in there, but these were the most interesting to me. So, words that gave away age. What words out there do you think might give away how old the Unabomber was? It's like an age bracket. Playing footsie. Negro, chick, broad. Working stiff. Who knows where the holy robots came from? Yes! Okay, that's what they said in the old Batman cartoon regarding, I think it was Robin, right? Holy robot. Yeah, okay, so that's a big clue. Because, yeah, okay, what is it? So, tautology, I don't know, I didn't look it up. I'm not gonna, I can probably get it. I'm not looking it up. Somebody has to look up, right? A belief system? That sounds right. It sounds right. But it can spell, there's a reason for this. Okay, so words that gave away age: chick, negro, broad, and holy robot. Those are the clues for the, James Fitzgerald and Robert Shuey. What would give away what religion he might be? Cradle to grave. Times of trouble. Unclean thoughts. Okay, so from that, they were able to determine he's definitely Christian, most likely Catholic. Unclean thoughts, exactly. Okay, so some words that give away location of where he's been and where he's from. Where he's been and where he's from. Did you know that there's a difference, like different areas of the country? Some say rearing children, and some say raising children. Right? Okay, so the northern part of the United States, rearing children in this time period. I don't know if it's still the same. Rearing children. There was also, during this time, there was a guy running a newspaper in Chicago who was trying to set new spelling trends, and he spelled clue and willfully wrong. And so because he grew up in that area, read those newspapers, that's how he spelled it. And that gave a clue of where he was. Robert Shuey was able to figure this out because he lived in the area at that time, and he knew that. And that was a clue for him of where the Unabomber was from. Working stiff, right? We talked about that. Working stiff is also something that you heard frequently up in that northern area, but it also does give you age as well. And then Sierra is something that's actually talked about in California, when he lived in California, but because he didn't use other like West Coast words, they said he might have lived there for some time, but he's originally from that northern area, which is Chicago. So yeah. All right, let's talk about what gives away his education level. Because education level, when you're trying to make a criminal profile, figure out who the criminal is, it's important. So education level, what would you What else? Surrogate. Over social media. Did y'all catch on my color coded now? That was for myself. But these are not general words, right? They're not words that you would, well, surrogates use a little more frequently now than it used to. Obviously, tautology is still not used. So, But so just from that little bit, you have an age, you have a region of where he's from in the United States, places he might have been, his religion, his education level, and you can pretty much at that time period especially determine his grade. So a lot of information. Okay, this is the manifesto and what it looked like. So additional clues were not necessarily just from the way the manifesto was written, like the words in it, but how it was written. There was complex sentence structure. And not was it just complex, it was correct. Meaning there were not a whole bunch of run-on sentences in there that were confusing. He used correct punctuation. He used long, complex sentences. His thought process was very logical. He leveled everything out without jumping all over the place. That's a sign of an organized mind. Okay. His sources that he used in there were outdated. So that gave the clue like he's kind of out of touch. He's not into, if he used to be a professor, he's obviously not part of it anymore. Or if he was part of the college, so he's not part of it anymore. And he doesn't have access to new material or new resources. I found this so interesting. They said it was not written to higher humanities and social science expectations. My instructor from TW is here, so that's really funny too. It wasn't level to here. It wasn't good enough for humanities, the writing, but it did meet expectations for the math and science. I was like, that's kind of hurtful, but if you think about it, it's true, right? If you read a science paper or a science article, it's going to sound and look different than when you read something about English literature. So that's what they're looking at. Those aren't even the words, it's just how it's written. That's all linguistics, all of that together. So the font and the placement of the punctuation actually shows that he used a typewriter rather than any kind of handwriting or a computer. Say by 1990s they had those available. So then he used a typewriter. And they were able to figure out by the font and the ink and the placement what type of typewriter he used. Right. So all of this came from the Georgetown linguistics professor, Robert Shuey, but it was James Fitzgerald, and Ted's brother, David, who sealed the deal. They sealed Ted's fate. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have your cake and eat it too. What does that mean? You can't have it both ways. You can't have everything you want. That's not how it works in real life, right? This is a pretty common English proverb. Have you heard it? Have you heard it just like this? Got it? So, as Agent Fitzgerald was reading through his manifesto, he found the phrase, "You can't eat your cake out of it." You can't eat your cake and have it. This is the normal way. Y'all just said so too. And you're right. But in this manifesto, it said you can't eat your cake and have it too. This is an obvious and unique reversal of a common proverb. In 1995, the Washington Post newspaper, they published the manifesto. David Kaczynski's wife read it. And she's like, David, we have a problem. Like, this is a problem. Your brother's been going crazy for a while, but I think he's leaving the mom. They talk about a bomb in the house. So she said, without a doubt, this is your brother. David's like, yeah, no way, whatever, but I'll call my wife and I'll just, I'll check it out. Yeah, and he took one quick look and said, oh my God. I got it. And so she approached her. Ted had sent David another similar letter a long time ago, and he saved it. In that letter to David was the same exact phrase. You can't eat The same exact phrase. So that, coupled with all of this, gave them the identity of the Unabomber 18 years. It was linguistics that cracked the case. Forensic linguistics. So, 1996, 18 years, Theodore Ted Kaczynski was finally arrested. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was only given that life in prison because he took a plea deal. He was, funnily enough, like, it's not funny, but he was sent to ADX Supermax in Florence, Colorado. Now, I live in Kansas City, Colorado. I can see the ADX Supermax out my back window. That's my hometown. So he was there for a really long time. We know people who were his guards. Yeah. It's kind of one of those people. It's called the Supermax of the Rockies. It's the highest, like one of the highest security federal prisons. But in December 2001, I don't know if any, or 2021, he was transferred to a medical hospital in North Carolina. And they didn't give the reason, but it's suspected that he had cancer. So he is now 80 years old.
So if you're gonna bomb somebody, don't put them in.
Don't write about it.
Don't talk about it, don't write about it.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so manifestos, definitely one type of forensic linguistics. Here's another ransom notice. Ransom notice. Okay? If your only clue to what's happening is a note that somebody left you, you're going to get as much out of that as you possibly can. Talk about the ransom note of the Charles Lindbergh Jr. kidnapping. Did y'all know there was more than one? Did you know there were 13 ransom notes? Yeah.
I know, kidney.
Right? So just shy of 2 years old, baby Charles was taken from his home on the night of March 1st, 1932. His dad was the famous aviator, Charles Lindbergh, known as the Eagle, the Colonel, famous, he was everywhere. He was the darling of the newspapers. So when his baby went missing, it's kind of like Justin Bieber's after something similar. It was bad. They were in a home that was supposed to be isolated enough to keep them away from the crazies, but not isolated, so isolated as to be dangerous. Obviously, that was not the case. They were very small. So, the first ransom note was found on the windowsill in the nursery. So, baby Charlie's nursery. They called him the Eagle too. It reads, "Dear sir, have $50,000 ready, 25,000 in 20 bills, 150,000 in $10 bills, and 10,000 in $5 bills. After 2 to 4 days, we will inform you where to deliver or where to load the money. We warn you for making anything public or for notifying the police. Child is in good care." I love that you guys are like, oh, I can't. It's obviously not English as a first language, right? Okay, so good. You see money, right? But there's no E in it. Important later. But they can spell deliver and indication correctly. That's pretty amazing.
Is this common, like putting the dollar sign at the end?
No, it's not. But wait, we're good there. Okay. Yes. Yes, you're exactly right, though. So, so it's not like in America, we put the dollar sign before. In European countries and in Germany, they put the dollar sign after. It's still a thing. Yeah, the lack of punctuation. Like, know where there is punctuation and where there is not. Because that also comes up. He wants to gain immediate attention by using an exclamation point, right? That exclamation, would you feel the same if it was just a period or just kind of left there? No, it's dear sir, attention to me, right? insert is capitalized, but there's no proper noun attached to that. It's making it a proper noun. Okay? There's a lot of contradiction even in this first note. There's a lack of spelling, but then there's really good spelling on really hard words. A lack of punctuation, but you're using sophisticated punctuation. There's a lack of proper nouns, but he's making things that are not proper nouns into proper nouns. So the last thing, don't say that the child is alive. Just say the child is here. Not the same thing. It's not the same thing. You cannot make assumptions that they mean the child is alive. Okay, ransom note number 2. It arrives March 6th. Remember, it was conducted March 1st. This is March 6th. It was postmarked March 4th from Brooklyn, New York. Notice that they spell the word not, N-O-T. They misspell it twice, and they spell it note, N-O-T-E. Okay, but funny enough, they can spell the word appointments correctly. The word really is misspelled, but the word necessary is correct. I don't know about you, but that word's still hard for me to spell sometimes. They finished their spell check, but they didn't have it back then. So how does that work? How does that make any sense to anybody? So the next 3 lines have no misspelling at all. But then they misspell the word be, E-E. They misspell it. But after everything else, the police and public are also capitalized. They are now in the same league as sir. This is important because it shows the importance of these groups of people to the author. So we want to know what the author thinks is important. But they don't capitalize the word child. They don't capitalize the word baby. And later they don't capitalize the word son. They mentioned they will feed the baby according to the diet. How do they know what the diet is? That's a clue. How do you know what the diet is unless you know the baby? But if you're not paying attention to what's written, are you going to notice that that's a very important clue? They still do not say that the baby is alive. We can only assume that he's alive because they're going to feed him. But not that they are feeding him. Yeah. Look at the verb tense there. It's not that they are feeding him now. They will. Okay. Verb tense is very important when you're doing language analysis. You can see lots of clues about what has already happened, but maybe they already know at this point. There's more punctuation used in this note, and the sentence structure is much more complex than the first note. There's a lot more going on in this. There is actually a second page to this note, and it demands an extra $20,000 in ransom because there was publicity and because it took too long. The dollar amounts are the same, but then they misspell the word case. So C-A-S-E, they spell it C-A-C-E. And for number, they spell it N-O-M-E-R. But they spell kidnapping, prepared, expected, and interested. Okay. And then they reference the baby again. They say, you're interested to send him back in good spirit or good health. They're interested in sending him back. What? They don't have to. Obviously, they would like to, but at this point, they're not gonna. Okay, so there's a third and fourth note after this. It talks about finding a mediator, a go-between between the families that was not law enforcement. That became Dr. John Condon. So this is the fifth note. Yes. So, dear sir, Mr. Condon, you may act as go-between. I don't need to read it to you, you guys can. If you want to look at it later, I have my notes. He was approved, but most notable in this note linguistically is that words that were previously misspelled are now spelled correctly or they're misspelled in different ways. It's not consistent. If you are having a spelling problem, it's going to be consistently the same. So the word be, B-E, was spelled wrong in a previous note. It's now spelled B-E-E. But it was spelled B-Y and the pass note. The word not is suddenly spelled correctly. It's a miracle. Okay? But in the previous two notes, the last like two notes, it was spelled incorrectly. And then they used the word where correctly, they spell it correctly. Previously they used W-E-R-E-H-W-H-E-R. So if someone is being truthful and genuine, their misspellings are going to be consistent. This is another clue that the person writing this, the author of this, is deceitful. And they're most likely trying to confuse the police and disguise themselves. And you can't believe anything. If you don't, it must be German, right? So there are two words, and this also introduces a new pattern. There are two words in here that have double consonants. So after has two F's, trap has two P's. You're always looking for these kind of patterns. There's another note, or later it says, also has two T's. But this is a stylistic anomaly. When we talk about corrected stylistic, this is what it looks like. Okay. What do you notice that's mentioning here? Or missing? What's missing here? The baby. They don't mention the baby. Isn't that the focus point of this? They don't mention it. That's not a good sign. They suspect by this time that they got this note that they don't tell you how good he's doing. They're not saying that he's feeding it. We're not saying that we're going to take good care of him. You can find him in a ditch somewhere. They're not saying anything good, right? They're not even trying at this point to say anything good. Okay? But you're right. All right. Next one. This is March 12th. And Mr. Common was sent a note to go to a subway station, then to a hot dog stand, and then they found a sixth note there that sent him to a cemetery. Like a weird case of scavenger hunts. Okay, so now we see the return of the misspelling of note, not. It is now back to note. Okay, house. Yeah. House is spelled in the traditional German way. It's capital H-A-U-S. That's the German spelling for house. You know what else has been happening in the newspapers that everybody's reading? Back to somebody from Germany. Isn't it interesting how this pops up now? But interestingly, house is spelled in German, but Frankfurter is spelled wrong. Frankfurter is German. It is a German word from Frankfurt in Germany. Why? They can't spell that right, but they make sure to put a house in there correctly. Okay. My dad, he and his family's from Germany. And so I asked him this because he grew up speaking German first as his primary language. He didn't even get to speak English in his home until his senior year of high school. It's like, Dad, is this normal? No. Okay, just checking because, you know, I mean, would everybody in Germany know how to spell Frankfurter? Yes. Just checking. Police is capitalized, Secret Service is not. Porch is capitalized the first time, but not the second time. Us, like us, is misspelled. US. So, but they can spell accordingly. Oddly, the word money up to this point has been misspelled consistently the whole time. So they're kind of thinking, not then, but now we're thinking as, you know, later armchair detectives that I am. But so if the suspect is ever found, maybe they misspell money and other things when you connect with clues, right? That might be a way. Yeah, no, that's a way. All right. So the next package is March 16th. It has a note. They send the baby sleeper. They wanted proof that the child was alive. Didn't happen. They said that the first attempt at a money draw failed. I could not find a picture of the original 7th ransom note. So that's why I put these in there, so that you guys can look at what some of the other clues look like. But there were some things about the 7th note that several different sites agreed on. They sent the baby sleeper. The kidnappers were really kind and said, like, we sent this to you to prove, now you owe me $3 extra because we have to buy a new one. The kidnappers refused to let anybody see the baby. They just said that he was well. Well can mean a few things. You can be well and truly dead. You can be well taken care of in your grave. You could, but they just said well. Well, what? They repeated directions and details of where to find a money drop that doesn't include a baby exchange. They only wanted to get directions to where to get the money, but they were not going to exchange the baby. I'm like, wait, that's not how this works. And then it says, please tell Mrs. Lindbergh not to worry, the baby is well. There's no mention of Mr. Lindbergh. March 30th, the 9th note is sent, and April 1st is the 10th note. On the 9th note, we notice suddenly, miraculously, another thing has happened, and money is spelled correctly. Somebody messed up. Money is spelled this. It is right. There's poor punctuation, poor capitalization, but in the second paragraph, all of a sudden, the entire paragraph is punctuated and capitalized correctly. The last line of this is utterly chilling. It is well. It is well. Little Charlie is no longer a baby, no longer your son, no longer the boy. It. At this point, Charlie is a dehumanized. That's not good. Pronouns are super important because they tell you these kind of clues and tells of what the person is, what might have already been. The next note is note 10. And then, oh look, money is still spelled correctly. And the word ready is now spelled correctly. And it has been misspelled repeatedly. There's an increase in the switching between S and C. Like it started out with no problem in the first few notes, and now there's an increase in how it keeps like messing up. Certain is spelled with an S. Please is spelled with a C. Place is spelled with an S. But innocence is correct. Okay? And again, you see more double consonants. Get and trap. Get in the past has been spelled correctly the whole time, and now it's being misspelled. So April 2nd, the 11th note was delivered, and there's instructions on where to find the boy. At least there is the boy again. Then the final two notes, it says the boy, they go to find him. There are still misspellings. The baby Charles is not on this book or any other. On May 12th, 1932, not the 1932 part. The body of Charles Lindbergh Jr. was found in a shallow grave about 4.5 miles from his home. Investigators think that he may have been injured or even died that very night because there was a ladder that was used to reach the second floor that was built, and they found pieces that had been found and they fell and suffered some kind of head trauma. So the Lindberghs never had a chance ever. It was never an option. And the kidnappers did it away with money. So, who do they think did it? What a surprise, Bruno Richard Hoffman, the German immigrant. Makes sense, right? After everything we saw, there's some German language in there. He was a carpenter. They found kidnapped money, like the ransom money in his house. He had to have done it. Absolutely. Charles Lindbergh Sr. was briefly considered a suspect. Mr. Condon, some people still think he did it. The go-between. And then there were two different taxi drivers who delivered notes. They think, okay, yeah, maybe they could have done it. The household servant, the baby's nanny, they were all thought to be guilty at some point, but eventually it was this guy who was arrested, charged, and convicted of the baby Lindbergh murder. what's the evidence? They tracked some bills from the ransom money. And they found when they did it, so 2.5 years later, it wasn't anytime soon. 2.5 years later, following the kidnapping, the money was tracked to a place that was where it was spent, that eventually led to the hotline. If you look over there, they did a serious handwriting analysis. They took the ransom notes and they tried to connect the dots between the handwriting analysis. That was super new science at that point, and very sketchy. It didn't always match. He was a German immigrant. He stowed away to the United States in 1923 at the age of 24. Kidnapping happened in 1932. So he was not very old at that time. Well, he was 30 something, but he hadn't been in the US for a very long time. And then they found a notebook in his possession that contained information like how to contact Don Condon, plus a sketch of the ladder, and all these other things. So that's pretty damning evidence, really. He had a criminal record in Germany and all kinds of other things. But none of this really mattered, even though there was an ESL language expert who said that he could not have written any of these notes because he'd only been speaking English for 8 years. Do you think an 8-year-old would have been able to write, or like somebody who had learned the English language would have been able to write that complexity in those notes? Say no. All right, so he was convicted of murder and he was sentenced to death by electrocution. He died, and he said they would give him life without parole. They said no. He said no, I am not guilty. I'm not doing it. He died by the electric chair. There's been a lot of people that said by today's standards he never would have been convicted at all. But back then they needed somebody to do it. Okay. So we went through most, not all of these, but we did go through a lot of the different types of forensic linguistics that you can use and how to use it. At the end of the day, what I want you to take away from this is that words matter. Your words matter. And if you liked it, I just launched a podcast called Words to Kill Live that is all about language evidence. Questions, or if you have any questions for us, you can ask it again. Contact questions. We're going to be taking a short break to set up for the next program, which are the counseling investigation demonstration, Randall and Detective Molly, and then we're going to go to the crime scene murder mystery program. We'll just be moving into that, and so just take a break, have some snacks.